Hello everyone, Kenty Tiger here with Bengali Engineering and Play. We are kind of doing a little bit of a test. I discovered a problem, and so the intention of this video was really just to try and define a little more about this problem. I was long ago expelled from the Programmers Guild, so I don't do programming anymore for the most part, but I can certainly appreciate all the problems and challenges that the programmers that are out there now are facing. Obviously, the technologies have changed a lot over the years, but certainly programming theory really hasn't changed that much. The process of putting together an algorithm to solve some sort of a problem really hasn't changed that much. Obviously, coding styles and everything vary dramatically from programmer to programmer, but so the issue here. Let me go ahead and we'll get into. I know this looks really busy on the screen here, but this problem developed. So this is the saber-tooth fighter, not vanilla by any stretch of the imagination. So Mark I batteries here, which are part of Mexpex Weapons Industries, I think, MWI. Beautiful weapons, love them. There are two scripts that work with these, specifically these. Well, one is everything. One is specifically these, and it's called a balancer. And I'm actually going to put you noticed I had the Steam Workshop up there. I'm gonna put that back up, but let me describe what's going on here. So there's two scripts that are running that really make the Mark I batteries here work really well. One is Whip's salvo. I'll put that up on weapons salvo. I'll put that one up too. I got to dig that one up again, but that one's working fine. But the idea behind that is that you set your weapons into a group, you name them salvo group, blah, whatever, and what it will do is control the firing of all the weapons within that group, staggering the firing. So you basically fire one, fire the next, fire the next, fire the next, fire the next, and then loops back around to the beginning, because sometimes weapons take a little while to load. And the concept is, if you stagger them out, that eventually it will come back to the first one that fires, which means you ultimately have a continuous rate of fire, continuous fire. So, Whip's weapons salvo script. The next script is actually unique to the Mark I batteries, which is a loader script, effectively. For whatever reason, and again, I admire these weapons. They work very well. They don't auto-load. So they are connected onto the conveyor system, but they do not load automatically. So you can literally fire them all the way down to 0 and you're done. You have to go back in manually, push the ammo into them, and then on you go. So for whatever reason, they do not load automatically. So there was a let me bring it back up here, because we're talking about this anyway. Let me go back in and do the. This is my my subscriber list. So let me go back to the beginning here and pull up. So this is one that we're talking about, and the salvo script. So we talked about Whip's weapon salvo script. So this is it. Works really, really well. For those of you not familiar with Whip, absolutely incredible stuff in their workshop. So I highly recommend that you go and at least check that out. Again, the idea here is to create salvo groups that will let you effectively continuous rapid fire on all of your weapons. So anyway, having said that, auto balance. So this is by SinglePhoton. Really awesome script, and let me go ahead. I'll insult your intelligence here and read for you. Script for balancing the small ship Mark I batteries from the Mexpex Warfare Industries mod. Load it into a programmable lock on the ship, and it will automatically distribute ammo evenly to all Mark I batteries on the grid. Only works for small ships. Another awesome mod. It's a script. So you can load it, run it, and it does its thing in the background. It just does what it does. Again, works with Mexpex Warfare Industries Mark I batteries, which are a fixed mount battery, 88 millimeter for the small ships, and I believe a 320 millimeter for the large ships. So this one just works on the small ships. Let me just review a couple other things, and I'll come back to Space Engineers because I really want you to see where I'm going with all this. Energy shields. There's a lot of people, so this is Cython's energy shields. Lot of iterations over time. Changes, broken, fixed, not broken because of the modder, but broken because, well, Space Engineers is Space Engineers. So, energy shields. I use these in a lot of my large ship builds. A lot of my large station builds, they work really, really well. It could just go on and on about this, but for those of you who have been building for a while and get into combat, warfare, defense, all that sort of thing, I know you're very familiar with these. There's another shield mod out there that is just as effective, has some other neat features to it. You can actually use them together. I think the only problems that I've seen, which may actually now be resolved, are the use within the multiplayer environment. And again, not because of any issue because of the modders, but because Space Engineers are Space Engineers. There are certain dynamics within the game environment, the game engine, that strangely affect a lot of things when it comes to multiplayer versus single player. So having said all that, so anyway, just somewhat highlighting the shields because this comes into play in my troubleshooting process, which I'll show you here in a minute. The other one I wanted to, that was, yeah, so again, SinglePhoton's Mark I batteries auto balance is really what we're specifically talking about here. So let me get this back off the screen and over to where. Give me half a second here. There we go. Okay, so back into the world of Space Engineers. So this is one of my builds, the Sabertooth fighter, and it was designed and built mostly to try out the Mark I batteries for myself, but also to try a completely different design. Obviously influenced by another Space Engineers YouTuber out there. So what I was trying to do is I was doing an update, and because of the number of Mark I batteries here, there's 28 total on this ship. I believe it's 28. So there's 6 and 6 for the port and starboard wings, Then there is 5, 6, and 5 forward, which are the main battery. So I wanted to get the salvo script working, and I did. It took a little bit of understanding on how to make everything work, and as is typical, when permissions being what they are, the ownership of blocks does matter. So I was having trouble making it work, and realized that when I had pasted in the new programming block, I oopsed and did not actually take ownership of it. So that was an oops. So having said that, did resolve that. So the salvo mechanism does work wonderfully. I was also deciding, hey, I really like the Mark I batteries, and loading them by hand is kind of a pain in the butt. So let's see what's out there. Discovered the auto balance from SinglePhoton, and decided, hey, I want to give this a shot. I had built a smaller fighter that I'm actually working on the Mark II version of this. So this was kind of the pieces of a Mark I, pieces of the original version. Then I ended up with a Mark I version, which was effectively taking the new cockpit from VCZ, which is a modular fighter cockpit, and incorporating it into the build, which changed an awful lot of things. Mostly because of how it was all put together. And then I was all like, okay, this design is kind of interesting, but it looks like a rabid bumblebee. So I wanted to do something that makes it look a little bit more like a proper fighter. And I don't know exactly what I'm doing. So doing with this is, as far as my design. Normally I have a design in my mind, and I try and fully flesh that design out, and then when I sit down in Space Engineers, I actually build it. And things evolve as they go. So back to what I was discussing is the autoloader, great feature, but let me show you what the problem is. So if you go into the programming block, normally you're going to do the edit. Let me just go ahead and demonstrate. So edit, workshop, you grab the script that you want, so highlight, then OK. It's going to come in and be in the code editor here. Check code, OK, and then remember exit. And if all goes well, there's going to be stuff here in this corner that's going to tell you about what's going on. And one of the things I noticed was this error here, the caught exception during execution of script, object reference not set to an instance of an object. Now I went through groups because obviously you can see I've got a lot of Mark I battery groups over here. Some of those groups cross over, so I have the forward groups, which are actually in 3 different groups, which because I've got the salvo script working now, I could actually get rid of those. I don't need 3 different groups to do what I wanted to do. We have the Mark I battery all, which is everything, so it's the port and starboard wings. And then I created the salvo groups, forward, port wing, starboard wing. That way all of the different groups will rotate through independently of one another, but ultimately rotate through. So as I was working with getting the salvo group working, the salvo group mechanism working, I discovered this. And as I went over to SinglePhoton's website, I saw somebody, in fact the only comment when I looked was this. So somebody else has experienced this, and now that I've experienced it, I was like, okay, what's going on here? And one of the things that perplexed me a little bit, and forgive me, I'm gonna go off screen and paste something in. So the Bobcat fighter here is my little bumblebee fighter. This happens to be the Mark 1. And let me just paste it in the world so we can see it. And here's really what I want to demonstrate with all this. So let me get into the world here. Here's the salvo control script. And if I bring up some other stuff that's happening here, so let me bring up all the programmer blocks. And one of the things you notice is we've got the salvo script running, we've got a bunch of other stuff running, but this one works fine. Mark 1 battery balancer, everything is happy, everything is working just fine. So this is exactly how it's supposed to look, and it works. It does what it's supposed to do. And so I was thinking, okay, so it works. Okay, so this thing worked. So I played with it. It was awesome. It was like, okay, that's cool. And then I get to the saber-tooth, and I have this exception. Now, obviously, there's a dramatic size difference between these two platforms, these two fighters. So I started going through and trying to figure out what's the difference. I've got 8 different scripts, 7 different scripts, in fact, running on this, where I've got 9 on here. And I started really playing around with things. So, okay, let me get rid of that. Get that off the screen here, and I'll show you where I was going with all of this thought process, which really kind of led to the troubleshooting. And let me hit the bottom dollar first, and then we'll come back into things. The bottom dollar is, for whatever reason, the Mark 1 loader will not work with the shields. Don't know why that is. So the bottom line here, the whole point of this video is to go through and quantify just the fact that it does. I couldn't begin to tell why, but this was the heart of the problem, at least within the scope of what I found. And these mock-ups here are taking effectively all the different scripted systems from the saber-tooth and putting them into a, out in your face kind of, let me get this sun, oh darn it, get the sun out of our eyes here. Okay, so we can see what it is. So we have the different groups of weapons. We have obviously a cockpit, we have LCD displays, we have a boatload of programming blocks, as you can see there, antenna, build and repair system, thrusters, gyros, all the stuff that you would need in a fighter. And the idea was to mock up all of the scripted systems to figure out what was conflicting. Was it a script conflict? What was it? So one of the things that I started simple and decided, is this a number of weapons? Because the Bobcat fighter has 10 versus the saber-tooth, which has 28. So this was the first iteration of the test. Down here, which you see, there's a boatload of Mark 1s here. And if we go into the script, then you see there are 48 weapons. It correctly identifies that there's 48 of them, and everything's happy. It works just fine. It loads in. This is completely stock out of the box. So if I go into the script itself, you can set up how many you want it to put into each battery. In this case, 10. Just to get out of here. So if we look at any of the batteries, you notice that it does indeed have 10. So the script is working just fine. It's loading in the appropriate number of magazines, as well as it gives the appearance of operation. So discovered it wasn't about the number of batteries. Obviously, if you have 48 Mark I batteries on a fighter, you're gonna do a lot of damage. So it wasn't a number thing, which is to say number of batteries available. So eliminated that from the idea. The mock-up here being complete, we have virtually all of the systems that are related to any given script. So all these scripts running. So in the case of the Sabertooth here, we actually have 10 different program blocks. And I did go ahead and turn them on the HUD so you could basically see all the different ones. We have one spare, so we're running 9 scripts and we actually have a spare programming block. As I put everything on, I kept everything as vanilla as possible. There's only really 2 exceptions, which is in the BRS block, the build and repair system script. You can name the display for that. There's a default display name, which is like 847 characters long. So I named it to something that made sense to me, and then I pasted that name in. So let me find, so here's the build and repair system script, and so this is the default name. So build and repair group 1 status panel, and mine is named text panel BRS. So within the scope of the programmer here, or the program, the script here, then you have to name it a particular, you have to use a particular syntax, and then you can put whatever name that you wanted into the script so it recognizes that particular panel as a display panel. Boom, done. So that's the non-vanilla aspect to what I did here. Everything else, I believe, is vanilla stock out of the box. No changes to the script, just because I wanted to test to make sure it wasn't a configuration error, to make sure it wasn't a script conflict error, whatever it was. I wanted to find out what it was. So, having said that, built the mock-up, which is effectively the systems of the Sabertooth scaled down a little bit. And here we have our Mark I loader programming block, and you'll notice we have the exception. So as I was building, I was checking, and it worked, and then it didn't work. And it was like, oh, damn. So what was it? Where was I at? I went backwards. The first thing I did was disable, as in turned off, all of the other programming blocks. No change in symptoms, still came up with the caught exception. I finally did copies of this thing and started deleting things. And one of the things you notice here, let me go down here, and we're getting to the core of the ailments here. So this one, there's 2 different ones here. This is a large block small grid large shield generator. This is small grid small shield generators. There's 9 of them here pasted on the front of the battery and 1 pasted up here. So 9 shields. The shield script is working, which shows, you know, the shield status and everything. And you notice here, caught exception. Okay, so this was my default build here, my default test build. The only difference between this test build and this one is I deleted all the shield blocks. Okay, the shield script, and let me go right to the shield script here. You notice this is on. It is running, but it says no shield generators found, which is absolutely true. Okay, but here we go. So exactly the same physical build, except no shield modules. This is the big shield. Caught exception. This is a small shield, single small shield, caught exception. So the bottom line here is that for whatever reason, and again, I don't necessarily know how the scripting works, but something within those 2 blocks, so the script for the Mark I loader and the shield block, whatever the shield block is, whether it's multiple shield blocks or singular shield blocks, do not work together. So as far as I can tell, when you have both the Mark I balancer running or loaded and attempted to run, and you have shield blocks on the same grid, then the Mark I loader will not work. So that's the basis of this video, trying to just add a little bit of definition to things, quantify what's going on here, or at least one of the problems that I managed to discover. So hopefully this will help out the developers of either or both of those particular mods. So this is Kenty Tiger signing off. Thank you for watching. Hope this is helpful for those folks who are out there experiencing the same problems, and we'll catch you next time.